This is Democracy Watch. So, Mark, I want to turn your attention to a pretty chilling quote that made national headlines from RNC co-chair Lara Trump. Here's the clip.
But we need to get through this election, and we need to play the hand that we are dealt. And so right now we do have a bit of an election season, but what you're talking about is exactly why we plan on having attorneys in all of these major polling locations across the country, because, Maria, we can't wait to litigate something weeks after it has happened. We need to strike at a moment's notice. Yeah. We want people there on the ready to hit things and hit the ground running when they happen, so that we are never seeing 2020 happen ever again.
We want people there on the ready to hit things. That's her quote. This isn't the first time that she's used these thinly veiled euphemisms for violence. What's the truth here? What trouble can the RNC actually cause? Because I know she says this kind of stuff, and kind of the rest of us just look at this in horror, but what can she actually do?
Yeah, so first of all, I don't think it's thinly veiled. I mean, she literally says, right, we want people there ready to hit things.
So yeah, I guess it doesn't get too. I think subtlety is out the window at that point.
I think subtlety is out the window, kind of like the recording career. You know, remember the whole Tom Petty thing?
Yeah, I remember it. That seared into my brain, I think, unfortunately, along with anybody else who's heard her recordings.
Okay, but in all seriousness, the Republican National Committee has a history of engaging in tactics that either borderline on violence or, frankly, cross the line on violence. Let's remember, one of the things that the Republican Party complains about bitterly is that for several decades, they were under a court order not to engage in poll watching, voter intimidation, these kinds of practices at the ballot box. And the reason why is because in 1982, they ran a program with off-duty police officers, with guns and batons, and off-duty wearing uniforms, by the way, that came close to looking like there was going to be violence. In 2020, let me remind everyone, the Republican Party supported Donald Trump when he incited an insurrection of people to violently attack the nation's capital. The Brooks Brothers riot, for those of you who remember, in 2020 was inspired by Republicans to put pressure on ballot counting in Palm Beach County in Florida. We saw crowds of people crushing against people trying to count ballots in 2020. So there's a lot of things the RNC has done in the past, but I am very worried that as we get towards 2024 and we see more election vigilantism by Republican-inspired groups, it was Donald Trump who told the Proud Boys, to stand back and stand ready, or whatever it was.
Yeah, stand back and stand by.
Right, stand back and stand by. I am very worried that that at this point, what is thinly veiled euphemisms are going to become more and more explicit, particularly as Donald Trump becomes more desperate.
And can you talk about the danger of normalizing this kind of rhetoric? Because this is the first time that I've really seen it so being used so out in the open. And what worries me is that by the time November rolls around, the media will no longer be talking about it because it won't be as sexy as it was the first time. And by then, the rest of these Republican audience members will have gotten the message by virtue of the Lara Trumps of the world saying it so often.
Yeah, look, I think you've put your finger on one of the great failings of much of the media right now and the threat to democracy, which is that so many things that Donald Trump and his supporters say right now are just sort of shrugged off. Donald Trump gives an interview and says, I won't necessarily accept the outcome of the election unless I like it, and people are like, oh, that's interesting. Donald Trump says a lot of things that involve violence and violence towards different groups at his rallies, and they'll get reported on and clipped here and there, but there is not sort of a systematic understanding that this is someone who spoke in violent terms in 2020. He led a attack on the nation's capital that became violent, that was violent, that attacked police officers, that tried to prevent the peaceful transfer of power. And so that when he's at rallies again now using violence, we should take it quite seriously. When people like Lara Trump are on right-wing TV stations or radio stations using terms that invoke imageries of violence, we need to take that very, very seriously. And when the media doesn't take it seriously, as you say, it becomes sort of normalized. And I think it is one of the greatest risks we have as we head towards 2024.
So what can we do on our end to protect against this threat from the RNC and from Republicans?
Yeah, so look, I think there are a few things. Number one is what we're doing today. And, I wrote a piece just for Democracy.com very recently that, again, said, the title of it was, when Trump attacks our elections, we will have no excuse. We will have no excuse the next time if we are not prepared. So the one thing we can do is what we're doing right now, which is to call it out. The other thing we can be doing, though, is we can be getting prepared, right? My team brings litigation in court to try to make it harder for these attacks on democracy to take place, make it harder to challenge people's voting rights, make it harder for people to subvert election results. And so there are things that people can do who are lawyers who bring that litigation. And there are things that states can do. You know, they can make sure that their state police, their local police, their investigators are as focused on the threats of violence around elections as they are to threats of violence around other things. That they are investigating groups that are intimidating voters with the same fervor that Ron DeSantis is setting up, fake election squads to go after innocent voters, right? The states have a big role here. Localities have a role here to not humor or take or dismiss these threats of violence.
And that's a great point. I want to dig into that in a moment, but you did mention Democracy Docket. For those who aren't yet signed up for Democracy Docket, it is an invaluable resource. It's a free news outlet Mark founded to focus on everything voting in elections. If you're not yet signed up, trust me, please sign up. I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. Okay, so to your point, Mark, I think we spend a lot of time assuming that Republicans are lying or they're mistaken or that they're just exaggerating when they threaten these things. Why is it important that we actually start to take these threats seriously across the board?
Yeah, so this literally is, like I said, why I wrote this piece, because I think that we have spent a lot of time as a country looking back on the 2020 election, the aftermath, and the run-up to January 6th, and then the aftermath to that. And I think, unfortunately, in too many quarters, it is viewed as a one-off event, as opposed to a prelude, a building up of, as bad as Trump was in 16, he was worse in 20, as bad as he was in 20, he'll be in 2024. There's some discussion of, he wants to be a dictator for a day, and Project 2025, and how much worse the second Trump administration would be. But I think we make a mistake when we assume that Republicans are just exaggerating, or they're lying about their threats. We need to take them seriously. They have shown us who they are, and we need to believe them. Because if we don't do that, we don't do it at our peril. Like, if we get to October and there are roving bands of militias, outside of polling places threatening people during early vote, shame on us for not taking it seriously now. I mean, obviously shame on them, but we need to be taking these things seriously now. And there is an impulse on the left. There is an impulse even in the moderate center to just believe the people on the other side don't mean it. That they are in fact just like us, acting in good faith, and maybe they use a rhetorical flourish that they shouldn't have. They're not using rhetorical flourishes. Steve Bannon means what he says every day. Donald Trump means what he says every day. And we just have to understand that they are who they say they are.
Right, at this point, they have lost the privilege of getting the benefit of the doubt. When you incite an insurrection on the U.S. Capitol, when police officers have died, when you've done everything that we've seen Republicans do over the last few years, you sacrifice the benefit of the doubt that you would have gotten otherwise. And also, to the point of the media, it's not like the media can't harp on things when they think that it redounds to their benefit as a story. I mean, how many times have we sat here listening to the danger that Joe Biden may be too old to be president, even as he's presiding over a country and doing it successfully right now, but we have to hear about the dangers that Joe Biden might be too old. It's been 4 years of that. Meanwhile, look at the threat that we are contending with right now, and it is a blip on the radar that is what the media covers.
Absolutely. And look, if you asked Steve Bannon, are you exaggerating? He would say no. If you asked Michael Whatley, the RNC chair, are you all exaggerating? He would say no. Like, they're not claiming that they are being misunderstood. They are being very clear how they want to be understood. Tim Scott, who said that he refused to answer the question that he was asked about whether or not he would accept the election results, he can't say he didn't understand the question. He was asked the question multiple times. Yep. And so I think on our side, we tend to want to give them the benefit of the doubt. And it is a benefit of the doubt that they themselves are not seeking, but which the mainstream media, because it wants to cover both sides are doing it, feels like it has to excuse.
Right, perfectly put. Again, for those watching right now, if you want to support the invaluable work that Mark does, not only in the courts, but in presenting accurate information in the media, please sign up for Democracy Docket. I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Mark Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.